Praise the Lord to the Acts 2:38 saints. Going beyond the basics. Going beyond the basics has always been my press, my struggle, my goal to obtain in Jesus Christ. As a Sunday school student, as a Bible believer, and I have always had good foundational teaching. But God has turned on a switch in my mind and heart and spirit to go beyond the basics. Going beyond the basics is more than just wanting to go there for whatever reason you deem you want to take that stand. But it is a life-saving journey on the way and on a road called straight. Going beyond the basics will cost you something. It will cost you a lot of money because you have to have the resource, and it will definitely cost you a lot of time. But the reward is immeasurable. Now, there are different, let's say there are different degrees of biblical knowledge. Now, you have your inductive methodology, which is very structured on the rules of interpretation, observation, interpretation, application. First and most important, you must observe the text. You must observe the text taxonomy. You must observe the text context. And don't be surprised, there are three types of context. You must study the syntax context. You must study the context in its whole, as far as how does this truth line up with other truth, and you must study the historical context, what it was in that time, what was the meaning of why this was all written, and what idiom values and all this other stuff that go along with the historical context, the idiom of language and syntax and all of that stuff. Now, once you get good at that, Kay Arthur got a good book on that. That's really structured to learn, the basic foundation of interpretation. Then you start to get in your homiletics, which is the art of preaching. Then you get in your hermeneutics, which is nothing but exegesis. Eisegesis is when you read something into the text. Exegesis is what you take out of the text based on the structure, taxonomy, based on the meaning of the words in its original language. Greek being New Testament, Hebrew being the Old Testament, based on this figure of speech. Do I take it literal? Do I take it figuratively? Is it symbolic? It's very foundational to learn your different figures of speech. What is a paradox? What is a metonymy? What is a synecdoche? All of these things will build you up and make you very foundational when it comes to standing on true doctrine. Very, very important. But these things take a great deal of time. Make no mistake. And the most thing that I find very unique is a little Greek can be very dangerous because you also have to go down this road of grammar. You got your moods, you got your tense. That's when you parsing verbs. Okay. That's very, very important because this do change the outcome of the text. Very important. You gotta know your cases basically. That's very important. Very, very important. These are some of the basics that make you a candidate to go beyond the basics. And see, it's very, very important to be able to rightly divide the word of truth by using these things. Now, once you go through those phases, then we have to have some concept about what are we reading. Very important because most people don't know how to use other translations in its truest sense of the matter, basically. When do I use this translation versus this translation? You have to learn about manuscripts. You have to learn about textual criticism. These are some of the things that will enhance your learning. But a word of warning about that, make sure that God is sending you down this path because you can become very confused when it comes to textual criticism, the authority weight of different manuscripts. You know, you have the Textus Receptus, Erasmus, which makes up the King James Version. You have the Westcott and Hort, which makes up the newer translations. And some of the scriptures follow its original strong points and its original meaning, and also a literal translation. Now, the thing about translations that's very important, you got two road maps to follow. You know, you talking about do I do a literal translation or do I do a thought translation? Okay. In other words, you have to deal with also what we call dynamic equivalence. Sometimes to make it flows, the word to flow properly in our language, you have to add more words to the text. So therefore, is it really in the text? No. Now some things when you go to some of the texts, you have to make sure you know the idioms basically, because see, idioms is very important from language structure to customs. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Now that's all fine and dandy for the children of Israel, but in your custom of the day, the proper response will be what the Philip Martin said: greet one another with a hearty handshake. See, in translation, you cannot always translate word for word. Sometimes you have to translate the thought. So, in the scheme of all these things, going beyond the basic, you must know these things, basically. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money because you must have the right tool in your toolbox. This is the Hut Man dropping some knowledge on you. Praise the Lord to the Acts 2:38 saints and go beyond the basics.